Hello and welcome to Runkle of the Bailey. My name is Ian Runkle. I'm a Canadian criminal defense and firearms lawyer. Recently, Canadian politics has gotten interesting in all of the worst possible ways. Global News just broke a story, and they're citing two unnamed national security sources, saying that a Liberal MP, Mr. Han Dong, had worked with the Chinese government, met with a diplomat, and asked that they delay releasing two Canadians who were held in custody because it was felt that this would help the Liberal Party's chances in getting reelected. This is shocking, but it sort of dovetails neatly with the other recent allegations that suggest that China had worked within Canada in order to help secure the Liberal Party's reelection. It seems that the Liberal Party is currently being favored in that sense, and that is really concerning here. The incarceration of these two Canadians was basically done as a retaliatory measure, and so this is a major violation of their sort of human rights. The notion that an MP, any MP, would work against Canadian citizens in order to gain political advantage is just kind of terrifying here. Now, I can't personally confirm this. This is, again, relying on two unnamed national security sources, but we've been seeing a lot of national security sources sort of providing information to the press, which suggests some real discontent within Canada's national security sort of apparatus about the relationship with the Liberal Party and the Chinese government. This is something that is concerning. But because of all of this, I'm getting a lot of questions about treason. And that's kind of a hell of a thing, but I guess I'll try to explain this. Now, one thing that comes up quite a bit is that people use the language of treason in different ways, and sometimes there's different meanings. You know, we will have a colloquial meaning in the sense that you might say that this is treasonous, saying that it's acting against, typically, especially acting against your own country. But that doesn't necessarily mean that it meets the legal test for the actual charges of high treason or treason. And the problem is that somebody might be saying this in the colloquial sense. They might be saying you are betraying your country, and other people who might be not acting in good faith, not interpreting this in good faith, will say, oh, but it doesn't meet the actual test. So let's talk about the actual test just so that we can all understand what treason is and what it isn't, at least as defined in the law. So let's have a look here. We'll just bring this up. This is offenses against public order, and then the subcategory of treason and other offenses against the Queen's authority and person. So high treason. Everyone commits high treason who in Canada, A, kills or attempts to kill Her Majesty. Now I'll note, because of the way Canadian law works, all of the references to the Queen or Her Majesty, as soon as she died, instantly became references to the King. So every time we talk about the Queen or Her Majesty, you should understand this currently as applying to the King. So there isn't like some window where you're like, hey, I can totally kill the King and get away with it because they haven't updated the law. No, this is automatically understood to apply to the King. So, kills or attempts to kill Her Majesty, or does her any bodily harm tending to death or destruction, maims or wounds her, or imprisons or restrains her. Which would get real interesting if she did something like, I don't know, stole a car out here. But, yeah. Levies war against Canada, or does any act preparatory thereto, or assists an enemy at war with Canada or any armed forces against whom Canadian forces are engaged in hostilities, whether or not a state of war exists between Canada and the country whose forces they are. So in this case, this wouldn't apply here. It wouldn't be high treason because we're not at war with China. I mean, we're not necessarily super friendly. There's some, there's some disputes, there's some tensions, but we're certainly not at war. We're not engaged in hostilities with China in that sense. So high treason, is not going to cover it. Let's look at treason. So everyone commits treason who, in Canada, A, uses force or violence for the purpose of overthrowing the government of Canada or a province. Doesn't seem to apply here. He's alleged to have met with a diplomat, and in fact, he confirms the meeting with the diplomat, But he says, oh, but that's not what we really talked about. Sure, we had a meeting and it was at the same time that these national security sources say, but they got it wrong. And he said he's going to clear his name, so I expect we'll see lawsuits against Global News. Again, I can't confirm any of this personally. I'm just reporting on what's been reported by Global News, but we'll see. B, without lawful authority, communicates or makes available to an agent of a state other than Canada, military or scientific information or any sketch, plan, model, article, note, or document of a military or scientific character that he knows or ought to know may be used by that state for a purpose prejudicial to the safety or defense of Canada. So this is basically espionage, right? If you steal military secrets and reveal them to a hostile foreign government, you can be charged with treason. C, conspires with any person to commit high treason or do anything mentioned in paragraph A. So, conspiracy to commit high treason is itself treason. D, forms an intention to do anything that is high treason or that is mentioned in paragraph A and manifests that intention by an overt act. So this is sort of an inchoate high treason. If you plan to kill the queen or the king now, and you, for instance, start setting up plans, that is treason. I guess not a big leap here, right? E, conspires with any person to do anything mentioned in paragraph B, that's the espionage sort of paragraph, or forms an intention to do anything mentioned in that paragraph and manifests that intention by any overt act. So trying to espionage is still treason. And this applies to any Canadian citizen who do these things while in or out of Canada. So that just basically says it doesn't much matter where you are, so long as you are a Canadian citizen or a person who owes allegiance to Her Majesty and right of Canada. All right, so the punishment for that is basically life with some narrow exceptions. Some treasonous acts only get you 14 years or a max of 14 years, but most of them are just life in prison is the specified penalty. Now you'll note that treason is actually fairly restrictive. And so, as I mentioned, people will use this rhetorically so that when somebody says, oh, I think that this is treason, and what they mean is that it's a serious betrayal of the country, they'll say, oh, no, it's not, because it doesn't meet any of these tests. And I usually that feels really disingenuous. It feels kind of dishonest, but it is good to know what the limits are. What could this MP be charged with? I'm not actually sure. I'm going to have to do some research to see if there's any sort of specific charges that would apply to these actions. But this may just be a situation where the proper response is political in the sense of holding, a party accountable for the actions of their members, especially if it seems that the national security agencies seem to have had some knowledge of this. It seems very difficult to imagine that knowledge wouldn't have been communicated to senior party members. Mr. Dong himself says that he was not contacted by CSIS, but I mean, no kidding. If they think that he's working with a foreign government against the interests of Canada, well then, of course they wouldn't be like, hey, we're on to you. They would just continue to watch and monitor, because you don't necessarily want to tip your hands on everything that you've got if you're in that kind of situation. So yeah, I guess the long and short of this is not treason, but still really bad. I mean, this is really serious, and I'm gonna wait and see. I'd like to see more information on this. At this stage, it's being denied, but this is going to be a political firestorm. And I mean, cynically, the really sad thing about this is that whenever there's a political firestorm like this, they've got a really easy way that they sort of deflect scandals like this, which is that they ban more guns. That's sort of always been their playbook. So I guess my personal, the things that bring me happiness and that improve my quality of life are likely to be targeted because they got caught with their hands in... The cookie jar metaphor doesn't really work here. This is just... The allegations are just frightening, right? because as Canadian citizens, we depend on our government to look out for us. And if they're not doing that because they think that that's going to get some advantage, who's safe at that point? Anyway, I did have a bunch of people who wanted me to talk about treason and the definition of it and sort of in this context, so there we are. I'm going to be continuing to do some coverage on the Gwyneth Paltrow case. I've got a bunch of things I want to talk about with the Rust case. There have been some new developments that I want to talk about. I also want to go over the Jensen Ackles interview, so I'm going to do all that. I just got to find the time. Also, we've got some some news, which is GWAX is going to trial. So we're going to talk a little bit about that and what that means. So I've got videos coming up on all of these things. Some of them will be live, some of them will be pre-recorded, but the world could slow down a little for a bit. I miss sleep. Just saying. All right, thank you for watching. Please like this video, share it with your friends, subscribe if you want to see more content. I also want to thank my Patreon supporters at the $50 level, CCFR, David Michaud, and Canada's National Firearms Association, as well as the Canadian Shooting Sports Association. At the $30 level, Sights and Arms Limited, and Jane Babe and Luxor. And at the $20 level, Lindsay Metcalf, Kyle Fox, Haywire, Gerald to the Bailey, Cameron Johnson, Andrew Elsich, and Vicky. Thank you as well to my $10 supporters who will be in the crawl immediately following. Thank you for watching. I hope this has armed you with knowledge. See you next time.